Hello, guys. This is Kay, and you're listening to Pod Rainbow Science. In today's episode, we're going to talk about internalized homophobia, and I'm going to give you a quick exercise to alleviate internalized homophobia's impact on your mental health. So don't waste your time. Let's go. Hello once again, and thank you for being with me today. Uh, these days, many gender and sexually diverse people speak out on their gender and sexual identities, and times when it had to be concealed are behind us. In most regions of the Western Hemisphere, that is Europe, both Americas, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, in most regions, homosexuality or bisexuality are considered to be normal variants of sexual orientation development, and nobody has any doubts about it. Also, transgender identities, both binary and non binary, are no longer considered disordered, and diagnosis is related only to gender dysphoria when a person experiences distress due to the difference between assigned gender and their identity and pursues legal or medical affirming interventions. But today I'm going to put aside diagnosis and tackle the quite prevalent problem of internalized homophobia and the way to alleviate its impact on our well being. To completely understand this issue, we must start with the term it's based on, that is homophobia. The term homophobia itself is well known, and the most plain definition of homophobia is dread or fear of gay men and lesbians associated with prejudice toward them that leads to discrimination in employment, housing, legal rights, and so on. This is the definition provided by American Psychological Association. And since internalized homophobia is experienced by gay, lesbians, and bisexual people, the question that surely comes to minds of many people is how on earth gay men can feel dread or fear of themselves? How lesbians can discriminate themselves? It sounds at least irrational. And indeed, when we understand it literally, it doesn't make much sense. But internalized homophobia is a little more complicated phenomenon, and it's operating on two layers, conscious and unconscious. When a gay person, and I'm using an example of gay men, but it can refer to anybody, to like lesbians, bisexual person, pansexual person, and so on. But this gay man realizes that he's not heterosexual when he's about 11 or 12 years old, on average. Some people know it since their early school years, and some people realize it when they're in college. But on average, it is 12 years when you know you're gay. However, average age of coming out, the moment when you tell someone that you're gay, is 20 years old. So it takes more or less 9 years from knowing it to yourself to telling about it to other people. And why does it take so long? Well, there are several overlapping explanations. One is that not everybody feels certain about their identity, so they prefer to wait. Some people need more time to explore this issue. Some people with minor identities cannot clearly see what's going on with them. They need some time to figure out whether it's just a phase they want to explore or something related to curiosity. We all, of course, experience during adolescence, or they're not sure whether they are homosexual or maybe it's something related to their gender identity. There are many thoughts and many emotions intertwined, and realizing that someone is gay or lesbian takes time. It's a long process to some people, and to some people it's easier, to other people it's more difficult. And to some people it can be really painful, especially when they have difficulties with coming to terms with their minority status. However, there is a very vivid thing all those people have in common. It is experience of social discrimination. It can vary from person to person. One of us might be living in more accepting environment, with a family that is open to gay people, and in that case, we encounter discrimination in school or media. We hear politicians speaking about LGBT ideology or homosexual people who destroy real families and so on. But when we are less lucky, we encounter discrimination from our parents, teachers, schoolmates, neighbors. We hear negative opinion about gay people in church, at family barbecues, and so on. And those two things start to collide. We and our sexual identity, we feel that we're gay or lesbians, and those negative things we hear, that gay people are promiscuous, they swing from chandelier, they have HIV, they are sinners, and so forth. And when it's once in a while, the damage is significant, but you have time to find your inner peace and you know that it's just one opinion and many people around you accept you and they will accept you. So this one opinion cannot ruin your life. But when it happens on and on again, it drags you down and you don't really have an option to go back up because you feel that everyone presents the negative attitude toward you. Even when there are plenty of people out there who could support you, your world is here and now. And in your own world, there's hardly anyone who has a positive attitude toward you, or at least nobody expressed out loud. Therefore, it's not so hard to imagine that you, to some extent at least, incorporate this attitude into your thinking and provide a negative image of yourself as a gay person. You think about yourself as of a promiscuous sinner, disgusting to other people. You get the deep feeling that your identity is something so bad that it must be concealed and nobody can ever know about it. Because once someone find out that you have feelings to your friend of the same sex, you'll probably lose all your friends. Your family is gonna reject you or even kick you out of house. And people in your school or university will bully you and so on. And the vicious circle of negative thoughts is spinning, and the more you think about it, the more rejection you expect from other people, and the faster the circle is going. And that is how the internalized homophobia looks like. If I were to describe it in easy way, omitting all those scientific words that are just confusing people, I would say it is a negative attitude toward myself stemming from social environment and the negative opinion I hear about people like me. And as I said before, the internalized homophobia could be both conscious and unconscious. Also, it can comprise behavior, emotion, or thoughts. And in its conscious form, internalized homophobia can take a form of, for instance, active seeking for help to convert your sexual identity. That is, as a gay man, you know that you are attracted to other men, so you go to the place where conversion therapy is offered, and you undergo all those terrifying procedures like pseudo psychological brainwashing or behavioral aversive interventions like group masturbation when watching female pictures or watching gay porn and taking nausea inducing drugs, just to name a few. Or you can follow the popular and heteronormative way of living, which is getting married to a woman, have children, and live as a heterosexual man. And sometimes people live like this for their whole life, or almost whole life. And I remember one patient a long time ago when I was still studying. I had practice hours at the psychiatric ward in a hospital. And there was one man with symptoms of severe depression. He was about 76, I guess. Very elegant man, very caring father of two children. He had a son and a daughter. And he was a grandfather of three girls. And this man lost his wife a few months before he was hospitalized. They lived together for about 50 years, and after she passed away, he felt really bad and lonely and developed the symptoms of depression. It was so hard to overcome that he must have spent 2 weeks at the ward. But his depression was related not only to grieving, he also felt deeply guilty because for his whole life he knew that he was gay and he never told his wife about it. He claimed that they never lied to each other, and it was the only thing he wasn't open about. And this was really sad story, and we saw very clearly that he wasn't able to come to terms with this guilt. And after a few individual therapy sessions, he decided to tell their children that he's gay. His children were surprised, obviously, and their reaction were also not so welcoming. They felt at first deceived, maybe, which often happens when someone comes out late in life. But at the moment this patient was leaving the hospital, they were trying to figure it out and tried to be as supportive as they were able to be. But the good thing is that his granddaughter's reaction was very accepting. They told him they loved him anyway and visited him every day to show their support. And day after day, this man was getting better and better. And as far as I know, he continued his therapy, but he was stable and could function well outside the hospital. Hey there! Thank you for being with me and listening to the show. I just want to remind you that you can listen to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or whatever platform you get your podcast from. And don't forget to click the subscribe button to get notifications about new episodes. But if you want to support the show, tell your friends about it to help me reach out to more people. And you can also click the link in the description and buy me a coffee. I'll drink it while working on the next episodes. Thanks again for being with me and enjoy the rest of this episode. This story shows that people could come out relatively late in their lifetime, but there are also people who never ever tell anyone, and neither their parents, friends, family, nor their wives, nor children ever know that they are really homosexual. And this would be the example of conscious internalized homophobia, which is realized and the person decides to lead a certain life. Another possible way of internalized homophobia impacting the life is unconscious, and this one is a little more complex. When something is unconscious, it means that we don't realize it's even existing. This term unconsciousness is often related to psychodynamic or psychoanalytical approach, like the one presented by Sigmund Freud. And to put it in a nutshell, according to psychodynamic approach, some things can influence our emotions, behaviors, and thoughts even when we are not aware of the action-reaction chain. Even when at first glance we can't see the relationship really does exist. And it can be understood, for example, like this. You go to the store in the morning and you can't find your favorite food, for example. Then a seller is unpleasant, and in addition, on your way back home, your bus is getting late, and if that's not enough, it's starting to rain. So the whole day goes as usual, and in the evening, you have an argue with your partner because his or her behavior irritated you. So those two things, this morning situation and that evening argument, could be completely unrelated at first. But this situation from the morning, this unpleasant situation you experienced in the store, increased your tension and irritation, and it maintained on a pretty high level. And in the evening, just one thing caused that you completely lost your temper. On the other day, this situation would be ignored or even remained unnoticed. But in this case, this unpleasant situation remained somewhere in the back of your head and caused that you were irritated throughout the whole day. And this is, of course, a very trivial example. Unconscious things can operate on much more complicated surface, such as unconscious hostility towards someone, which shapes your behavior when you're around this person. or as it is in the case of internalized homophobia, unconscious negative opinion about yourself influence the way you behave on a daily basis. So imagine that you are convinced that people in a certain place, for example, in your new workplace, you think that people there are hostile toward LGBTQ people. You don't know it yet because you're new in this workplace. You don't know those people either. You haven't heard them saying anything, neither positive nor negative about LGBTQ people. But the fact that you expect them to be against your homosexuality, or to say so, you're gonna behave like basing on this fact, you're gonna behave in such a way that they cannot, or it would be very unlikely to say that you're a homosexual person. For example, you're not gonna keep a photo of your partner on your desk, or you're not gonna attend meetings with your husband or wife, nor you're gonna talk about your private life. This could be one example of influence on your behavior. Well, another example would be uncomfortable feeling, and this one is very vivid in unconscious form of internalized homophobia. Uh, you would feel very uncomfortable while being around other gay people. You can go to the pubs and clubs or LGBT community centers, but you don't really feel good in such places. You feel uncomfortable, some kind of anxious, but you don't really know why. You can't figure out what's going on. Or another example is that you don't feel comfortable while holding hands with your partner when you're walking down the street, for example. And you really cannot explain why you get this feeling. It's not directly related to fear that someone would offend you or harass you or anything like this. You just have an impression that this discomfort comes from nowhere. And those are the examples of unconscious influence of internalized homophobia. And all of those things could be, of course, tracked down and on how you develop such feeling or why you behave a certain way. But those things are, and the reasons are very individual and should be analyzed within the therapy process or with your counselor. It's not the general direction. And I cannot objectively assess what's the reason for this. But to quickly sum it all up, internalized homophobia is a negative attitude toward oneself presented by LGBTQ individuals, and it stems from social prejudice and builds up throughout the whole life, especially formative years of an individual. And internalized homophobia can operate on both conscious and unconscious surface and can impact both emotions and behaviors, and even thoughts, which can, of course, lead to poor mental health and poor physical health of an LGBTQ person. The relationship between internalized homophobia and mental or physical health is the theme for one of the upcoming episodes, so I'm not going to tackle it now. Instead, I just want to suggest you an exercise that could help you alleviate its impact on your life a little bit. And I hope this is going to help you to thrive through Christmas time with your family, which could be not that accepting toward you. This exercise is taken from CBT, the cognitive behavior therapy. And the good thing is that it's relatively easy to do. It doesn't require a lot of knowledge on psychology and a lot of effort, but you should remember two things. First, the more you do it, the more often you engage in doing it, the better you are at doing it. So it takes a few times to get used to this exercise and to see how it really works. And the second thing is that it's not once and for all exercise. One time wouldn't change your life. It's just like with dieting. One pizza wouldn't make you overweight and one salad wouldn't make you thin. That's the same thing. CBT therapy is based on practice and activities. So to see results, you should practice and engage in suggested activities. This exercise I'm talking about is called thought challenging. And it's good to control something we call negative automatic thoughts. all these thoughts that comes to your mind out of sudden, you don't really know where from, but these thoughts increase anxiety, low self-esteem, low mood, and so on. And negative thoughts don't necessarily have to be taken as a fact, and oftentimes they are not facts. Your negative thought can be that your roommate from college hates you because you're gay, for example. You don't know it for sure because he never told you that. But you observe he's not talking to you often. He's away all the time and so on. So from your perspective, the relationship is very easy. He doesn't like you. Why? Because you're gay. So what does he do? He doesn't want to have too much in common with you, so he's leaving the room. However, this is just one explanation. Based on the same behavior, his behavior, I would say that maybe he's extremely introverted person, really shy, or even he has an Asperger diagnosis. That explains why he's away when you're in the room and why he's not talking to you often. Those are two equally relevant explanations, but your thoughts, maybe because of your previous experience, maybe because of your high level of internalized homophobia, your thoughts are automatically directed you to your homosexuality as the underlying reason. That's why, if it bothers you, I want to offer you this exercise that would help you to control this process. And this exercise wouldn't turn you to always positive person. It doesn't work like this. It's not like a happy pill which you take and everything suddenly is positive and the world is beautiful. But this should help you to look at your thoughts and analyze it in a balanced way. In consequence, when your thoughts are not always or most of the time negative, your mood remain a little higher, and you wouldn't be bothered so much by the situation you experience. When you've never done this exercise before, you will need a piece of paper and something to write with just to have better control over the process. But after a few times, when you have enough practice, you'll be able to perform it in your mind, and this would help you, hopefully, to block your negative thoughts in a moment. This technique is not like a magic wand. It's based on logical perspective and analyzing reality, just to see whether your thoughts are backed by facts or they come from your previous experience. So they are rather backed by our emotions. So the first thing we need to do is distinguish the thoughts from emotions. On a very basic level, emotions are usually expressed with one word, that is happy, angry, anxious, lonely, scared, and so on. And thoughts can be described as sentences. Just like he looked at me, maybe I have something on my shirt. Or my roommate hates me. Or the bus is late, I'll get the sack. And so forth. And the exercise I'm talking about is based on 3 steps. First step is focused on catching your thoughts. So it's like a moment for yourself to look into your head and think about what you're thinking about. So think about your thoughts. The second step is focus on looking for evidence. So this is the moment to ask yourself a question whether there is a reason to have this thought or not. And the third and the final step is focused on looking for evidence-based thoughts. So we need to find an alternative thought and substitute the previous one with the one that seems to be more accurate in this certain situation. In the first step, where we are supposed to catch our thoughts, we should start with identifying the triggering situation. What happened that the negative thought or thoughts showed up? It can be very challenging to find an exact situation that is related to our thoughts, but writing down the whole context with all the details makes us remember everything better. And in some cases, we'll be able to identify the moment or a person that caused our negative thinking. Or after a few times of doing this exercise, you'll be able to identify certain pattern that occurs in several situations and then link it to our negative thoughts. In this step, we should also write down what emotions were related to this situation. So you can write as many emotions as you want. You can also write down contradicting emotions, because there's nothing wrong with feeling happy and angry over the course of one incident. That's absolutely okay. And additionally, you need to write down the thoughts that you remember you had. So we should have the description of the situation, one or more thoughts we identified, and all the emotions we can recall that are related to this situation. When we have it written down, try to assess each thought and each emotion on a scale from 0 to 100%. In the case of thoughts, think of how much you believe this thought. When your thought was nobody likes me, try to assess how much you believe it is true. And do the same thing for emotions. But instead of thinking how much you believe it, rate how intense this emotion was. So when we have it all written down, try to identify the so-called hot thought in this situation. Usually, this is gonna be the thought that is rated the highest. So the one you believe is the most true. So for example, when you have thoughts rated like 50%, 20% and 60%, usually this one that is rated on 60% will be the hot thought of the situation. It's not going to be easy, especially when you do it for the first time or first few times even, because we usually do not think, we do not link our thoughts to emotions. So it's just going on like kind of subconsciously. We're not used to think about it this way, but all we need to do is practice. And after you practice, it's gonna be easier and easier, and it just takes time to get used to this exercise. And even when you fail at first, just don't worry. It happened to me also, and happened to everybody who did it for the first time. So don't worry. I needed several times and several hours to get used to this exercise, to see how it works. So it's absolutely normal. And if you have trouble with catching your thoughts and emotions, just try to help yourself with using a few questions like, what were you doing? What were you thinking about? Who were you with? What was the place you were at? What happened a few minutes before? What happens a few minutes after? And just try to place yourself again in this situation. Try to go back to this situation in your mind. So that's going to be a little easier to perform. Okay, so when we have this first step completed, we need to move to the next step, which is called looking for evidence. And after catching the hot thought, for example, the hot thought could be my roommate hates me, or I'm going to be kicked out of work, or I'm not going to pass this exam. And we need to write down all the evidence for and against this thought. But the crucial thing here is that we are looking just for the facts. Not emotions, not opinion, not presumptions, just plain facts. And some people say it's easier to do when you imagine that you are in the court and your hot thought is the central point of the prosecution, and you need to defend it in a court hearing, and evidence will be given from both sides. And you have to be in the shoes of both sides at the same time. To help yourself a little bit in the situation, you can look at it from a different person's perspective, for example. So you can ask yourself a question, if your friend would have this thought, what would you say to them? Or if I wasn't nervous about, how would I look at this situation? Also think of what is certain about it. What is the logical structure of the situation? Was it directly related to your thought or your emotion? Or was this incident that triggered your interpretation, or triggered your opinion, or triggered your previous experience memory, and this in consequence prompted you to think this way? And all we need to do is just to get rid of your opinion, get rid of your interpretation, just look at the facts. And in order to do it, you can, for example, draw a table, or you can just split the paper into two pieces and just write down all for's and all against. And after a while, just put it aside, take a few deep breaths, and come back to this to start the step 3 of the exercise, which is called finding an evidence-based or alternative thoughts. This third and the final step is based on step 2, so that's why step number 2 is crucial in this exercise. But I just want to remind you that this final step, this step's aim is not to create a completely positive situation. It's not made to reverse the situation from the negative to positive. The aim and the goal here is to create an alternative thought, an alternative thinking process to have more balanced view of this what happened and whether it really is the reason for your negative thoughts, or maybe this is just your emotions, your previous experience, and your opinion influencing your thinking. And when it wouldn't influence your thoughts would be different. Maybe better, maybe more positive, or maybe your emotions wouldn't be so intense in the situation. And the crucial point in this third step is to create an evidence-based sentence to summarize all for's and all against from the step number 2. So when you, for example, identified the hot thought, which was my roommate hates me, you probably wrote down that your roommate was rude when you entered the room. He didn't want to talk to you, or he left the room, and this made you sad and disappointed. But on the other side, in the against section, you might have written down that he was angry, but it wasn't related to you. He was nervous because he might have had a tough exam, for example. And in the third step, you should write down an alternative explanation. That would be, for example, my roommate was rude when I entered the room, but it could have been related to his high level of stress. Okay? Or in the section 4, you might have written, my roommate doesn't want to talk to me, but on the opposite side, you can write, my roommate is introverted and he doesn't talk too much in general. So the alternative thought would be that my roommate, this wouldn't be my roommate hates me because I'm gay, but it would be my roommate is not talking to me because he's very shy. So as you see, the main idea here is to summarize the facts and combine it all together to get a more balanced view of the situation. And when we have it done, we need to once again do the rating, but this time we need to rate the new belief and the new revised thought. So again, on the scale from 0 to 100, rate how much you believe this new thought is true. And the important part here is that you shouldn't expect yourself to rate this new belief on 100% true after doing the exercise once or twice or even 3 times. But remain honest with yourself and try to look at the situation in a really balanced way. So if you rated your previous thought as 90% true, and the new alternative thought you rate as, for example, 11% true, it's okay. It is very good that you at least had to think about an alternative interpretation and you took your time to get a broader view of your experience. And also try to rewrite, or rather rewrite the original emotions that you rated after describing the situation. Whether you believe it wasn't that intense or it was intense because you, for example, found the fact that supported your reaction. You can apply this technique to all the negative thoughts and all the tough emotions, and this exercise would be at first really challenging to perform, but as I told you before, the more you practice, the better you are at doing it. And to help you see clearly how it looks and how to use it, I'm going to upload a table that you can use to describe the situation and emotions and thoughts. And also I'm going to show you an example of my table, how I completed it so that you can see my example. And of course, if you have any questions, just write me an email. I'll be happy to help you. And if you have troubles with understanding this exercise, I can also give you additional tips on how to use it. It might not be, I have to tell you this also, it might not be applicable to everybody because you might have some troubles with getting in touch with your thoughts, for example, or with your emotions. And if you are such a person, you should probably visit a counselor or a therapist just to help you lower your anxiety and just to show you how to get in touch with your thoughts. But if your anxiety is not extremely high, you should be able to use this exercise. And I hope that it could alleviate a little bit your negative emotions and thoughts. And you can perform better in the stressful situations. And challenging incidents wouldn't have such an impact on your mental health and wouldn't be such a huge burden for you. I hope this is going to help you at least a little bit. And I think that Christmas and, spending time with your family is for at least some people a really tough and hard time. And if I can help you anyhow, I think this exercise is one of the best way to do it. And of course, if you have hard time, you can also write me a DM. I'll try to answer your messages. And thank you, by the way, for all those messages you sent me before. That was very nice. Okay, so I think that's it for today. It was pretty lengthy episode. I'm gonna upload this table in the link in the description so you can download it for free and use it in whatever fashion you like. And as usual, thank you very much for your attention today. Thank you for being with me again. Take care and bye.